I think for a lot of people, if you were to really sit there and ask them, what do you want to do in the next 5, 10, 20 years? And we've all heard these questions before. But despite that, I think a lot of people haven't really sat there and thought to themselves, what do I want to do? Like, what decisions do I want to make? What does my future want to look like? And is that future based on what my spouse wants me to do? Is it based on what my boss wants me to do? Or is it based on what I personally want to do? So I think once those two things are kind of understood, what goals you have and how much you value your time or how much your time is worth, we can call it. I think once you kind of get those two things down, a lot of people can manage their time more appropriately.
Have you ever hit a point in life where everything feels like it's falling apart? Financial stress, no direction, maybe even a sense that you just can't keep up with everything? My guest today, Lenny Richardson, has lived that story. Kicked out of college, working late shifts at a gas station, and battling depression, Lenny hit rock bottom. But instead of staying there, he used that pain as fuel for transformation. In this episode, you'll hear how philosophy, time management, and grit helped him rebuild his life and launch a successful and meaningful career. If you've ever felt stuck or unmotivated, this conversation will remind you that a flourishing life is possible if you're willing to take that first step. Stay tuned. This is Fulfilling Work, Meaningful Life, the show that helps you find and create greater meaning in the most important aspects of your life. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Fulfilling Work, Meaningful Life. I'm your host, Anthony Kraker, and I am joined today by Lenny Richardson, aka Leviticus Rich, entrepreneur, author, and podcaster, right?
Yes, yeah. Actually, I'm trying to get my podcasts back up and running. I used to have a podcast called Meeting Virginia a few years ago, and I kind of took a temporary hiatus just because moving around, I was in the process of getting married, wasn't sure where we were gonna settle down. But now I'm back in Northern Virginia, so that'll get launched again in the near future.
Very cool. That's the nice thing about podcasting is you can kind of stop and start, depending on what's going on in your life, right? Well, first of all, tell us what's the Leviticus Rich thing? Explain that to me.
So it's not that interesting of a story. Pretty much Leviticus Rich. When I was in college, I had a friend who was kind of a frat guy, and he would call me Lenovitis as a joke.
Okay.
And one day, just because we thought it'd be funny, I don't know what our humor was back then, but I changed my Facebook name to Lenovitis Rich. And my dad, for whatever reason, couldn't pronounce it, so he kept calling me Leviticus Rich. And then, so Leviticus Rich, I was like, that sounds way cooler than Lenovitis Rich. And then it kind of stuck. So from that point on, I figured, Leviticus sounds a little bit cooler. I feel like it sticks in people's heads more than Lenny does.
Right.
So that's kind of my internet name, I guess you can call it.
Gotcha. That's cool. Well, for my audience who may not be familiar with you, tell us a little bit about your backstory, because I understand you went through a pretty rough period some years ago with depression and some financial difficulties. I think you actually got kicked out of college, right? Just kind of give us the background story of Lenny Richardson.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so Lenny Richardson's my name. Currently, I have a business called Productivity Accelerator. I try to help young busy professionals get more done in less time. Sort of the origin for me creating that business it's kind of I guess you can call it the combination of a lot of experiences I've had since college. Like you mentioned, when I was in college, I went to Penn State University, got kicked out twice. And I tell people I got kicked out, and I think the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, maybe he was a bad student or some kind of academic reasons. It was purely financial. On both occasions, I just couldn't afford the tuition. And the reason, not to get, I guess, super deep into it unless you'd like to, but the reason why I couldn't afford the tuition, I had a scholarship for engineering to get into Penn State. And around sophomore year, when I had to declare the official major that I wanted to go with, I thought it through and I figured engineering wasn't the best path for me in the grand scheme of life. So I dropped engineering and I chose, I think initially it was psychology as my major. Then I switched to criminology. I was kind of jumping around. I went from
Yeah.
psychology to journalism to criminology and kind of stuck with that. But because I switched my major, that made me ineligible for the scholarship, which I hadn't thought through because I was a sophomore.
Yeah.
And so they pretty much said, they sent me kind of this very polite letter. I think it was around December. I forget the exact year, maybe 2012, 2013-ish. I forget the exact year. But pretty much it said, you don't have enough money to pay for your tuition, so
Yeah.
don't come back next semester.
Oh, wow.
So went home for a little bit towards the end of December, tried to figure out what I wanted to do. I didn't want to stay at home with my parents. Went back to college, kind of just had an apartment and kind of got launched into the work life that I wasn't really prepared for. Had to work a lot of retail jobs and worked at a gas station trying to make ends meet. They didn't meet. And sort of that prompted me to kind of really go through, I guess, a personal development phase for the first time really in my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I guess, actively going through a personal development phase. And to kind of make a long story short, that led to me reading more, learning about finances, philosophy. I got really deep in philosophy, fitness, things of that nature. And so eventually I went back into college. I did eventually graduate after many years of trial and error. And I kind of took the things I learned in the few years while I was kind of bouncing back and forth into college. And some people would say to me, over the course of X amount of years, 10 years or so, you seem to have done a lot. You wrote books, you have the podcast, you're working all these jobs. That's not the simplest thing to do. How do you do it? And that led to me kind of creating Productivity Accelerator to help people kind of manage their time, structure the day effectively. Pretty much because I guess the thesis, you can call it, that I had was no matter what goal you have, time management is sort of that glue that makes it a reality. If you want to get in better shape, time management. If you want to make more money, time management's necessary. If you want to have better relationships or just have time for hobbies or just have time to chill and just watch TV guilt free, time management is that thing that makes it happen.
Time's something I actually think about a lot as I get older, because it really is the most precious commodity that we have, right? It's the one thing that we're always running out of. And so the way that we use our time has a lot to do with how fulfilling and meaningful our life is going to be. Was there a particular point, like a turning point for you? I know you said you were kind of working these jobs that weren't making ends meet. Did you kind of hit a rock bottom point, or was it just a kind of a cumulative thing where you realized over a period of time that you needed to make some changes in your life?
Yeah, so it was very gradual. Sometimes when I tell these stories, it sounds like it's an overnight process. It was definitely gradual. I will say one moment that really made me kind of, I guess, what's a good way to put this? It really made me realize that I wasn't in a point where I was happy. I think that's kind of where the depression idea really clicked for me. And it sounds, this is going to sound maybe a little bit silly, but for me, it was a really, I don't know, it was a very emotionally heavy situation. So there was one time in particular, I was working at this gas station called Snappy's. And again, to make ends meet, I would take pretty much every shift I could that they would allow me to take. And one of the shifts I took frequently was, I think it was from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. because no one wanted to do it. And it was a college town. So any college student that was working didn't want to work the late shift, especially from Friday through Sunday. Yeah. That's when the parties and the bars are happening. So I remember one night, I think it was a Saturday, and it's kind of hard to describe, but where I would stand as the cashier, there was sort of this big window to the right of me where you could see outside. So you can see people walking past the gas station. And I remember there was one night, it was probably about 10 or 11. All the college kids come in. They all get their Gatorade and their drinks and other miscellaneous items that probably don't need to be discussed on this podcast. But they're pretty much going out to party. And this probably doesn't sound super interesting, but I remember at that moment, I kind of realized I'm falling behind, and it kind of just put everything into awareness that I'm not where I want to be in life. Mainly because in my mind, I'm thinking I'm in college and I should be having fun, but I'm working every single day, constantly, still not making enough money to even pay for rent. I was still behind in rent. And
Mhm.
actually, I know for a long time, I would continuously get eviction notices. And of course, that made my roommates mad at me at the time because we all had a collective lease.
Sure.
But yeah, it just put into perspective that I need to do something in my own life in order to get out of the situation. And I think from that point on is really when I started to invest more in just reading more, trying to just answer questions so that way, ideally, I'd set myself up for, I guess, long term success. Um, that wasn't like the only moment where something like that happened, but that's kind of the one of the bigger moments that stands out in my memories.
Yeah. And so, as you were going through this process of learning and discovery, you came across the idea of Eudaimonia, a Greek philosophical concept. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So yeah, actually, it was literally around that exact time where I found that concept of eudaimonia. So pretty much what I would do is around that time, I didn't have anyone around me to really give me any good answers.
Mhm.
Everyone around you is in college; they're just focused on their classes or hanging out, partying, whatever. And I didn't have any mentors or anything at the time to give me feedback. And I remember one of the main questions I had was, how do I make more money? Because I had no money.
Yeah.
um, and that sort of led me to go to this local library that was off campus. I got a library card and I would just read. And I would read about finances. And then you read stuff about finances, it sort of will reference another book about personal development. You read about personal development, that might lead to a book of philosophy or fitness. And you kind of just go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And I remember literally I would like take books and go to my job at the gas station. And I used to work as a dishwasher. And during my free time, I would just read the books or try to hide it underneath the counter because you're not supposed to be reading at work. But I tried to make every moment count. And one of the philosophy books, I think it was a book. I want to say it was The Republic. I don't remember the exact book, but he referenced eudaimonia, and he kind of referenced Socrates, who I guess coined that phrase eudaimonia. And
Okay.
the idea behind eudaimonia, at least as told by Socrates, is that it's sort of the, I guess, the framework for the fulfilled life or just kind of the good life, essentially. And
Hmm.
his thought process is if you want to have a fulfilled life, you need to have three aspects of eudaimonia developed. I call them pillars. And there's no real particular order, but the first one is essentially health, the second one is wealth, and the third one is relationships. And by
Okay.
having all of those, they don't have to be perfect, by the way, for anyone listening, but his thought process was there needs to be sort of an active pursuit of these three things. And by pursuing these three things, you become happy. And then if you're happy, then your life is fulfilled. So that was kind of the idea behind it. And it sounds so simple when people hear it. And I thought the same thing. I thought, oh, this is basic. Just be healthy, have money, and know people. Very
Yeah.
simple. But then at that time when I thought about it, it kind of clicked, and I was like, I realized I didn't have any of those three things. My health was terrible at the time because I was just working so much. I was relying on fast food, and it was cheap. I didn't really have money to afford much. I didn't know how to cook, so health wasn't that great. Money certainly wasn't that great. I think at the gas station I was making about 7.25 an hour, and
Oh, wow.
I remember this one time they bumped me up and they really hyped it up and they said, "Oh, you're gonna get this great promotion, this great raise." And I'm excited, and they said, "Oh, your raise is $8.25 now. So now you make $8.25, a whole dollar." But so yeah, I had that, and then at the gas station, or I'm sorry, at the bar that I worked at, I think as a dishwasher, I made about $11 an hour, and I had little things on the side. I did kind of like journalism for the startup, but it wasn't really paying the bills at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, so money definitely wasn't there. And then relationships also was pretty much non-existent. I wasn't dating anyone at the time. I think if I tried to date anyone at the time, I'm sure every girl I would have talked to would have rejected me. Um, I didn't really have a good social circle with friends just because I was working so much. I didn't have time to go out to the bars. I didn't have time to spend, to go to events with friends. I didn't have time to make friends. So I kind of read that idea of eudaimonia and thought, I'm failing in all three of these categories. Let me try to fix this. And that's sort of what I tried to do. I leaned into it more, tried to learn more about money, health, relationships, speaking, because at the time too, I was super anxious, couldn't look anyone in the eyes if I wanted to. So I really put a lot of effort once I understood that idea of eudaimonia into building up those pillars, so to speak.
Yeah, you mentioned the concepts are simple, like it's not super complicated. But one of the reasons that I started this podcast is because one of the observations I've made is that there are a lot of people who are just kind of going through the motions of life, and they're not, they're not finding meaning in the most important aspects of their lives, right? Health and relationships and financial stability, work. And so even though the concepts might be simple, the practical application isn't always that simple, right? And it's easy to just kind of get caught up in the flow of life and kind of not focus on the things that matter most.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people, I think most of the best things are pretty, I guess, simplistic to understand, but the hard part is the execution.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a discipline thing. I think sometimes it can also just be we understand what we should do, but we don't always understand the exact steps to take, I guess, to get that thing done. But I think more often than not, I think the things we're supposed to do is relatively easily comprehended or understood by most people. I know I have some friends who eat fast food a lot, and I'm guilty of this myself. I still eat fast food from time to time. But I think most people can understand something along the lines of I shouldn't eat fast food because it's probably not healthy, but we justify reasons why we continue to eat fast food. And this is not towards anybody in particular. I'm guilty of this myself. Up until I think this last year, I had a minor addiction to McDonald's and Taco Bell. So I this is,
my son is a big Taco Bell fan. So.
It's delicious. Can't blame him. But I think for most people that, if you were to say, do you think Taco Bell's healthy? I think most people would say no, it's not healthy, but I like it because it's fast. I like it because it's cheap. I shouldn't be eating it. It's or like alcohol. A lot of people, even if you're not like someone who drinks it a lot, you can probably say to yourself, beer is super unhealthy, but I like it. For whatever reason, it makes me feel good or I just like it. Should I drink it? No. Am I going to stop? Probably not. No time soon. But yeah, so I think a lot of things in life though, simplistic in nature, we can understand it pretty easily, but there's something that prevents us from doing it or getting it done.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier time management. What have you learned about time management and how to manage your time so that you're making the most of these pillars, as you call them, of eudaimonia?
Yeah. So as far as time management goes, one thing I've noticed I'll say two things I've noticed for a lot of people. The first thing is, I think for a lot of people, because we don't see time, it's easy for it to kind of get lost, if that makes sense. And kind of just I guess to illustrate that point a little bit better, I saw a movie a few years ago. Actually, my girlfriend, she thought about me and Productivity Accelerator. And she said to me, I know this movie, I forget what it's called. It's with Justin Timberlake. And she said, you should watch this movie because it reminds me of the stuff you talk about. And the whole premise of the movie is that they can see, I think, time. I forget the exact movie, but they can see time above their head, I believe.
Yeah.
Pretty much the poor people of the movie, they sell their time for things. And the rich people are able to kind of like buy time from other people, if I'm saying that correctly. So the rich people pretty much have tons of time. Literally have like tons of time. And the poor people are always they always have days to live. So they're always scrambling to do things to get a little bit more time to kind of prolong their lives as long as possible. And I told her when we were watching this, I was like, if people had that above their head, everyone would make the decisions everyone would make on a daily basis would be better. Like imagine you're scrolling through social media and I don't know, you can see time above your head and you're like, I don't know, when you scroll and you can see that you've spent an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours just scrolling, you might go, oh man, let me not scroll because I got 5 years to live. Hopefully not, but I have 5 years to live and I just spent a good fraction of it just scrolling this year. That was probably not the best use of my time.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the first mistakes I tend to see people make is a lot of people just don't think about how much time they have. And so it's easy for it to get wasted. Second thing with time that I've noticed is I noticed this actually really recently. On my newsletter, I sent out a survey and I was asking about different ways people are trying to accomplish their goals. And I was surprised a lot of people responded and they said, I don't even have goals. So I don't have a way to complete the goals because I never really thought about what I want to do in the first place. So I feel like that's the second thing I see a lot. A lot of people don't have goals for themselves that they want to accomplish. I see a lot of people where they have goals for other people. Like if you're an employee in a business, you might have a goal that's based on what your boss wants you to do.
Yeah.
Or if you are a student at school, you might have the general goal of I need to complete this test or I need to graduate, which is fine. But I think for a lot of people, if you were to really sit there and ask them, what do you want to do in the next 5, 10, 20 years? And we've all heard these questions before. But despite that, I think a lot of people haven't really sat there and thought to themselves, what do I want to do? Like, what decisions do I want to make? What does my future want to look like? And is that future based on what my spouse wants me to do? Is it based on what my boss wants me to do? Or is it based on what I personally want to do? So I think once those two things are kind of understood, what goals you have and how much you value your time or how much your time is worth, we can call it. I think once you kind of get those two things down, a lot of people can manage their time more appropriately.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Somebody mentioned to me, I can't remember who it was, but somebody mentioned that movie to me recently with Justin Timberlake. And I was like, that sounds like a movie I need to watch. So I'm glad you brought that up. It reminded me that I need to find, I can't remember the name of the movie either, but it sounds interesting. But yeah, that idea of time running out, right? It can really change your perspective and help you to focus on the things that are most important in life. So what kind of tips, tricks, or whatever do you do to help you manage your own schedule and time day to day?
Yeah. So personally, what I like to do, and this is what I recommend to everybody, I'll say the first two things. First, get an idea of what your time is worth. I tend to find that people are very, I don't want, stingy is not a good word, maybe clingy with money for the most part, sort of in the sense
Mm-hmm.
that if you looked at your bank account, maybe not you personally, but anyone in general, if they were to look at their bank account and they saw that $5 was gone, they'd probably freak out and they'd go, where did that $5 go? Like, I don't remember paying for this thing. Did I get scammed? And it puts them into action to try to figure out where that $5 went and to figure out, can I get it back? Or, what's going on? That same level of anxiety, in my personal opinion, should be applied towards time. And I think the way you do that is by having an idea of what your time is worth. So the first thing I would recommend to anybody, and this is what I do myself, is I always have an idea of what my time is worth. And I suggest to people, make it as objective as you possibly can. Make it realistic. Don't just be that person who, no offense, people that work at McDonald's. I worked at retail before, so there's no shade. But if you're someone that works at McDonald's and say you make $10 an hour, don't walk around and pretend like your time is worth $200 an hour.
Sure.
I think that's a bit extreme for someone in that situation. But if you are that person that works at McDonald's and your time is worth $10 an hour, in your mind, consider your time to be worth $25 an hour, and then start making decisions based on your hourly rate. So I give this as an example. If you want your time to be worth $25 an hour, and say someone calls you on the phone and it's a really pointless conversation that you don't even want to have, it's not entertaining, it's not fun, it doesn't get you anywhere, it doesn't help you accomplish goals, none of that. Don't entertain that hour-long conversation, because that's essentially the same as you giving someone $25, or even worse, it's more like they're taking $25 out of your bank account. And I think for
Yeah.
most people, when they frame it that way, they would think, yeah, I wouldn't want some random person taking $25 out of my bank account. So my thought process is, cool, don't let people waste your time. That's essentially what I'm suggesting. Don't let people waste your time.
Yeah.
But if you're thinking about how much your time is worth, it's easier to prevent that from happening. So that's the first thing. Have an idea of what your time is worth. Second thing that I do this almost every day, is I script out my entire day. Use a planner. I recommend a planner all the time. I tell people if
Hmm.
a planner is too expensive or if you just don't like it, if you don't like writing it down, that's perfectly fine. Most phones nowadays have Google Calendar, or Google Calendar is actually separate from the phone. It's free if you have a Gmail account, I believe.
Yeah.
But use a calendar app. Android, iPhone, I'm pretty sure every phone has a basic calendar app. Just use that. Schedule your day. I recommend starting from the time you want to wake up, put that in first. Second, put in the time you plan on going to bed. And then the third thing, just to not make it overly complicated, whatever your goal is, reverse engineer what the goal is, and find just one thing that gets you closer towards that goal. And then schedule some time to put that in. And the reason why I suggest that is because everyone has different schedules. If someone who might be in a more, say they're an entrepreneur and they might have more flexibility of their time, it might be easier to put in multiple things in their calendar. That's fine. If
Yeah.
someone's listening to this and they work at a 9 to 5, it's harder because 9 to 5 is blocked up every day and you don't really have a say in that time frame. That's fine too.
Right.
But from 6 to 8 or 6 to 7 or 6 to 9, whatever, depending on, what the goal, what the task is and when you want to go to bed, all that, just schedule one task, one thing that gets you closer to your goals. And I think if most people just did those two things, had an idea of what their time is and scheduled their day, within a month, most people I think would get so much further ahead.
Yeah, I think so. Do you do that scheduling in the morning? Do you do it the night before? Do you like do it the whole week? Like, when do you normally do that for yourself?
I usually do it. I usually do it the night before. So what
Hmm.
I've done lately, and this is just kind of something that I do for myself, and if someone schedules their day frequently, I would recommend this too. What I do is I schedule every day in advance, just kind of on repeat. So months ago, pretty much what I did is I make Mondays kind of like podcast days or days where I might reach out to publications to get PR, something like that. So Mondays
Hmm.
is very specific. Tuesdays and Wednesdays are my video editing days. And I can almost probably show you. I'm not gonna do it right now, but I can show you like in my Google Calendar, it's on repeat every single week. I forget what Thursdays and Fridays are, but so I set everything up on repeat ahead of time. And then the night before, what I do now is I just review to make sure nothing's changed, or if I have to change something around, I will. Last night, I made sure on my calendar that I had the podcast today because I forgot over the weekend when this podcast would be. So the night before, I just check everything to make sure everything looks good for the following day because it's easier to check it and then at a glance move things around. But if you're not at that position yet, then yeah, I would recommend the night before, just schedule your day. And I think for most
Yeah.
people, it sounds like a lot of effort. Once you do this 1 or 2 weeks, it'll get super consistent and you'll find that you're doing the exact same things every single week anyway. So it's not really that much effort after the first 1 or 2 weeks of
Right.
you doing it. So
It's more about developing the habit of
exact
scheduling out your time.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You'll just build up a habit. So it's not that bad. A lot of people give me pushback on that, but it's not that bad.
Yeah. So you have a program called the Productivity Accelerator. Tell us about that.
Yes. So the main thing that we offer is sort of one-on-one training. We do group trainings as well, but I think the one-on-one training's a bit more effective. And
Hmm.
so essentially the one-on-one training, it's about 30 minutes to 45 minutes every single week, ideally. The client gets to schedule when they want to do it. I almost always recommend they do it every single week, but some people like to do it every 2 weeks, once a month. That's fine. But it's one on one training. Essentially, we kind of go over your schedule for the week. We try to sit down with you, figure out what your goals are, figure out what you're currently doing to reach that goal, and essentially sort of almost consult you and suggest ways to kind of make the goal easier to accomplish or things you might be doing that are hurting you. Like we have a lot of people who social media it just kills so much of their time. So
It's such a time suck. Yeah. It's crazy how much time we spend on social media, myself included. It's ridiculous.
yeah, me too, me too. But for someone who's like really chronically struggling to not scroll through social media, we might suggest, hey, when you're working, and I do this to myself because social media gets me, I'll take my phone and just put it in a different room, face down, airplane mode, no alarms. Because if you hear that ping, or if you hear someone call you, or if you hear that text message, it'll compel you to pick up the phone. Then you kind of forget what you were doing in the first place. You open the
Yeah.
text, you start scrolling through social media. 45 minutes go by, and the thing you were working on has still not been completed.
Yeah.
So, and it sounds simple, but it happens to a lot of people. The engineers at Meta are very good at manipulating our psychology.
Yeah. Yeah, they are.
But yeah, so that's one thing. If it kind of just depends on where the person is, what their goals are, and what they currently do. But we suggest strategies to help people break out of whatever negative routines they have and kind of build up better habits to achieve their goals.
That's great. So where can people find you and connect with you? And if they want to learn more about your program, where can they learn more about it?
So for the program itself, they can just go to productivityaccelerator.org. That's the best place to go for that program. And we all, right now, I think recently we just came out with like a 7-day training. It's free, by the way. It's a 7-day training that walks you through kind of what I would consider the 3 secrets to success, just based on science, and just kind of spoil it if you don't mind. Pretty much those 3 things are iteration, consistency, and grit. If you have those 3 things, you can pretty much, according to science at least, be successful in any goal you have. But for that, productivityaccelerator.org is the best place to find that. If anyone wants to contact me directly, my website, lennyrichandson.online, is probably the best place. And if you're someone who's on social media a lot, then Leviticus Rich on Instagram is the best place. And I'm on social media a lot too, so I'll probably respond faster on Instagram than through email.
Cool. We'll be sure to drop all those links in the show notes so our listeners can find you if they want to connect and learn more about your program. Well, this has been a great conversation, Lenny. I appreciate you sharing your story with us and the things that you've learned. I think there's a lot of value here. I love the idea of eudaimonia. I studied a little bit of philosophy in college and enjoy reading philosophy, so it resonates with me, and certainly the ideas of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle about living a flourishing life are something I've thought about over the years. So definitely some great stuff there. Listeners, if you want to learn more about it and you're willing to spend some time reading some sometimes difficult texts to understand, but always interesting texts, some of the great philosophers of ancient Greece, it's certainly worth your time. Any parting words of wisdom for my audience before we sign off?
Yeah, just try to keep better track of your time and have goals, and I hope everyone listening has a flourishing life.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lenny. I appreciate you joining us today on the show.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. Please remember to check out my website, fulfillingworkmeaningfullife.com, to sign up for my monthly newsletter, Meaningful Insights. When you do, I'll send you a free digital resource that will help you find or create a fulfilling career. Until next time, let's make it a meaningful week.